Hi, guys. Welcome to another episode of the Confident Momcast. I'm your host, Tiffany Farley. I am a maternity and newborn photographer currently living in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And the Confident Momcast is where we have fearless conversations about all things pregnancy, birth, and postpartum. And so I bring on different moms and different baby and birth experts to share their stories and share their experience with you and give you a space safe to learn about all things about becoming a mom. And so I'm really excited tonight for my guest, Lauren Thomas of Lauren Jolly Photography is joining me, and she is a birth photographer. And so I was really excited to have her on the Confident Momcast because I do not take on birth photography, although I've done it a little bit, and she is just amazing at it. And so I think there's a lot of misconceptions about what birth photography is, what the value of it is, and I just wanted to provide an opportunity where she can share her experience with us, why she photographs it, why it's important to her, why she sees it as a valuable, why she doesn't think that any mom will regret having that investment and having those memories made. So I'm just really excited. And so I'm going to bring her right on. She's going to introduce herself, and we're just going to talk about what birth photography is, why it's valuable, and give you the chance to ask questions. So I'm going to bring Lauren on. And at any time, you're going to see there's like a button below. If you are watching the video version, there's a button that'll take you right to Lauren's website. So if you want to learn more about working with her personally, but we're also just going to talk about how to find a birth photographer in your area if you're not local to Lauren. So welcome to the show, Lauren. Thanks for being on.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm so excited.
Will you just take a few minutes and just for anybody who doesn't know you, just introduce yourself. If you have any kids, kind of just like what's your story?
Yeah, so I live in sort of middle western North Carolina. I live in Winston-Salem. I have two boys. I have Finn, who's 4, and Rory, who is almost 18 months. I've been married for almost 6 years. And yeah, I've been doing birth photography for about 3 years now. And I love every minute of it.
That's amazing. So what made you get started in birth photography? Have you been doing that since the very beginning of being a photographer, or maybe did you do other things and then kind of transition? What was your story in getting started with birth photography?
Yeah, so I actually used to shoot weddings. I sort of had convinced myself that was the only way to make money as a photographer, which I think a lot of photographers think when they're first starting out.
Totally.
So even though I didn't love it, I kind of just did it and it was fine. And then I shot my first birth when I was pregnant with my oldest. And I had hired a birth photographer. And so I kind of just got my wheels turning. I was like, well, what if I tried this? And I reached out on a Facebook mom group and I was just like, is anybody interested? I'd love to shoot your birth. And I found a mom, we connected, and I shot her birth. She was planning the same kind of birth as me. She had a water birth at a birth center. So it was just really, really special. And I fell in love, like just right out the gate. From there, I did take a little break just because my son was born right after that. And then in 2016 is when I really got going. And here we are. So
that's amazing. I would love to just take a few minutes and talk about maybe like just in general what birth photography is, because I think that even when I bring that up in conversations, and I feel like even today, just sharing about this live episode and saying we're going to be talking about the value of birth photography, I feel like I could picture the immediate reaction that some people might be having to be like, birth what? Like,
totally.
I feel like some people don't even know it exists. B, right. People are like, where's that camera going? That is not anything that I want. So can we just like take a few minutes and break down what birth photography is, what it includes, and maybe just like some misconceptions? Like what are some things that maybe people think that it is, but it's actually not? That makes sense.
Totally. The faces I get when I tell people what I do, it's hilarious.
For sure.
Especially men. They are just blown away. But yeah, so basically for my business, at least, what I like to focus on is the emotion of the day. So if you think about the fact that when you get married, it's like a no-brainer. Like you're going to hire a photographer, you're going to spend a lot of money, like you're going to make it happen. And then for some reason, when we go to start a family, it's not the same thought process. And when you really think about it, that makes no sense. this is the moment you're meeting your child. Even if it's not your first, it's your second child, it's the moment you're meeting these children, and it's life-changing. So I think some of the misconceptions are, it's all graphic, it's all crowning shots and gore. And while some of that has its place, and if that's what you want, we are happy to do it for you. It's not all about that. And like I said, what I really like to focus on is the emotion of the day, your support people, your partner. I say this all the time, but birth stories are love stories. I love getting those moments of, mom and dad just like holding hands or just really working together as a team to bring their baby into the world. I mean, it's incredible. So it's definitely not all graphic, one. Two, another thing that I hear a lot is that the room will get super crowded. And so people are really concerned about having like an extra person in the room. And so what I like to talk to moms about with that, if you're planning a hospital birth, you're going to have a lot of people in and out of your room. You're going to have nurses in and out. You're going to have your OB or your midwife in and out. Lots of people, and it's just kind of the norm. And so having a birth photographer or a doula or someone who does both is really going to feel like more comfortable because it's someone it's someone who's there the whole time. It's going to feel more comfortable than the nurses even. And then if you're planning an out-of-hospital birth, usually at a birth center, at your home, there's so much space that you're not going to feel crowded. And if you hire someone who's experienced, they're going to be able to read the room. And if you need a minute, we can leave. We can always leave. Many times I'll just be like, I'm going to give you guys a few minutes. I'm going to step out. So that's really common, and we know how to kind of read that. And like I said, you're going to get to know your birth photographer. You're not going to be meeting me when I walk in when you're having a contraction, So I'm not going to be a stranger to you in that moment. Another thing is I think people just don't understand the idea. Like, okay, yes, I want that photo of when I meet my child, but why would I want the labor? Like, why would I want myself in pain? That makes no sense. But like I said before, being able to see the support you're receiving, the love from your partner, the strength that you have. I mean, it's really incredible to get kind of that different perspective, because when you're in labor, it's a blur. I mean, people talk about their wedding day being a blur. Like, your labor is just, you're in a different world. You're not going to realize all these amazing things, all of these people that are loving you and supporting you. So I think it's really valuable to have that to look back on and to share with your children. And then the last thing is, I hear a lot, like, I'm going to feel really vulnerable. That's very intimate. Like, I don't know about having someone who, may not be a stranger, but isn't someone I know very well being in there. And I think that what comes into play there is making sure you choose the right person and you choose an experienced person to be there, and someone who does know about birth, someone who can read the room, someone who understands what's going on. They might be able to understand if you need a moment or if there might be sort of like an emergency going on and they need to step out. So I think we might talk about that later, but when you're looking for a birth photographer, I think interviewing people, asking them questions, and knowing their experience is really important. And if you hire a professional, they're going to know how to read these situations, and I promise you're not going to feel like they are interfering. So.
For sure. Oh my gosh, those are great. Such great points. And I would say those are definitely the top misconceptions, definitely like the content of what's being photographed, and like you have a conversation with your birth photographer on like, these are the photos that I want. And it might not be anything that has to do with what somebody else wants. It might just be, I want you there to have the photos of the very end of it when we meet our baby. And that's what, if you're there for 16 hours just to get that photo, that's what I want. Then that's what you can have. Like, you don't have to, it's not kind of a like one size fits all experience. Like, you have an opportunity. That's why like choosing the right birth photographer is going to be so important, because you're going to build that relationship. You're going to share, this is what's important to me.
Totally.
So I'm really glad that you brought that up. I have I have photographed 3 births myself.
Okay.
They were all for friends of mine. It was never something that I offered officially as a business. It was just something that I knew these women really well. And it was just kind of an understood thing that like, if I make it, I make it. And if I don't, you know what I mean? But I'm going to try.
Right.
And I was able to make all 3. And I guess like I never really kind of knew that birth photography was a thing until I was asked to do it. And it like changed my life. And I know that sounds so dramatic, but it just like,
I get it.
I mean, I'm a newborn photographer, so I meet families and new moms and new babies all the time. And it's still so special. But to see a mom and to see a dad meet their baby for the very first time and like the facial expressions and the emotion. And I mean, it's just like, there's nothing like it. And I love that you brought up too, that it kind of like, even the labor aspect, it really does share the story. And after the fact, it's really true. I've had so many, I mean, I'm not a mom yet, but I have so many conversations with moms who are like, I mean, I remember bits and pieces, but it was the photos that actually helped me go back and remember, oh yeah, like I was thinking that I was like already at this point of labor during that, but I wasn't. Like I look back and the photos actually, and especially if birth doesn't go as planned, if something, takes some sort of like this was our plan and this happened. I've heard a lot that, the photography can actually help a mom process what happened by having these like markers of time that was like, okay, this is, cause it's an experience to go through birth. So to have something to kind of just even help mentally, and emotionally process that experience. Totally. Would you say that some of your clients were maybe hesitant, but went through with birth photography and then like afterwards were like, I can't believe I ever like was hesitant on that? Do you find that it's like one of those things that like after they have the photos, they almost become like evangelists for you in the fact of like, no, everybody needs to have Lauren because I didn't think I was going to like it. But like now that I have these photos, now I understand. Do you feel like that's a common story?
Yeah. Oh, totally. One of my good friends, we were just talking about this. She was like, I can't imagine if I didn't have those photos. She actually, during her labor, she had one point where she kind of went into the bathroom at the hospital and she was in transition, working really hard. And she said, I don't want photos. And so I just stepped back, kind of stayed in the corner, hung out for a little while. And, and then she came out and I continued shooting. But we were just talking about how she doesn't regret doing that. And she's glad that I listened to her in the moment, but she's even like kind of sad that she doesn't have those moments. And she's like, I can't imagine if I didn't have any of them. And she was one of the people that was very much on the fence at first. So I think, and I hear, it breaks my heart, but I hear all the time from second-time moms, like, I wish I'd had that. Like, why didn't I do it? Because it does feel like this big sort of weird, like unknown thing I think it is gaining some traction, but it's still a new thing. But then once you have it, or once you see a friend who's done it, you're like, oh, it clicks. Like, it just makes total sense. Like, why wouldn't you do that? So yeah, I definitely have a lot of clients who are like on the fence for sure. And then we have a conversation or they talk to a friend and they're so glad they made the decision to do it. So I've never had someone say they regret hiring a birth photographer.
For sure. I mean, I feel like it's even, I know it's something that you can still have them done when the baby's older, but I actually will hear that as well from just moms who felt overwhelmed postpartum and put off newborn photos because they just felt like it was a lot. And you have to listen to yourself in those moments. But even then, I feel like moms have regret that we're like, I just wish I just pushed through and got the photos because now, now he's 6 months old, or, you know what I mean? Or things like that you hear. Do you feel like you being the person in the room who's taking the photos, do you feel like that takes kind of like the pressure off of dad of having to like, think about all of that, or even just like the pressure like off of mom as far as like how do you feel like it helps their support team not have to think about that because somebody else is taking care of it? Do you feel like that's like an actual tangible, like, thank God Lauren's here kind of feeling where they can just actually be present and just help instead of like, you know, the baby, you know, they meet the baby for the first time and mom's holding the baby and dad's like frantically like, where's the phone? You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, who wants to say, where's the phone? You know what I mean? When you meet your baby for the first time. So do you find like that's a common thing as well?
Totally. I actually, I read this article one time that said, if you're taking a photo, you're actually less likely to remember the moment. And that like kind of like broke my heart into, and it just made me think of my work. I mean, all of our work as photographers applies, but I think specifically in situations where like that, where it's like once in a lifetime moments. I mean, can you imagine if the dad was like taking the photo and he was less able to remember the moment because of that? I mean, that like really kills me. So yeah, I mean, I think that me being there takes a lot of pressure off dad. He can totally focus on mom, which is so important. And I think just having someone in the room, having a birth team, which can be a doula or a birth photographer or both. I think having someone in the room who's with you the entire time and who also just has experience, I think just the sense of normalcy is something that, especially as a first-time parent, you're not going to know, like, what's normal. Like, is this normal? Is how I'm feeling normal? Is how she's feeling normal? And so having someone in there to just be like, this is all normal. Like, I've seen this dozens of times. This is perfectly normal. It's great. Things are going well. I think that's like undervalued. Like, I think people don't really think about that, but having someone in the room who's just like, yep, this is good, it's all normal, is so, so important. So
for sure. I love that you brought up to the like a strength of a great birth photographer can read the room. Like, I love how you even worded that. I can definitely, just in the few that I've done, can definitely, I mean, I can't even imagine that being like more important than it is. Like, you need to be able to read what's happening, to read how mom's feeling. Does she feel like, you know, there's too much going on? Being able to just kind of, you know, be that person in the room that's not overstepping, not, you know, creating like the shot that you want to get, but more of just being aware of like what's happening, because it's such a sensitive time. Have you ever run into any issues as far as, I mean, I guess this kind of goes a little off topic, but I instantly thought of, you know, at a hospital, there's going to be a little bit more restrictions as to like where you can be and what you can do versus maybe at a birth center or, you know, or at home. So what would you say? I guess it would fall under like the experience that you have, like, you know what those are. You've probably being local have been to that hospital many times and like knows the ins and outs. But for maybe a mom that's wondering, like, is that going to be a problem? Am I going to be allowed to have a birth photographer? Have you found that there's any, that you run into any obstacles as far as photographing at a hospital? I had a question come in as we were preparing for this episode that somebody was wondering, like, what would the birth photographer do? Should there be like certain restrictions that might hinder them from getting the kind of photos that mom wants? Have you ever run into anything like that? Or is it pretty normal? Like, is it more, I guess, like having birth photography is more accepted now, so it's more of a normal relationship with the hospital? But what's your thoughts on that?
I definitely think it is becoming more accepted. But every hospital is different. And so I always talk to my clients, you have to have a conversation with your care provider as early as possible. So just say, I'm hiring a birth photographer, like, what are the policies? And just communication is always key with that. I thankfully haven't had too much pushback. I mean, I try to sort of know my place in the room. So I'm not going to get in a nurse's way. I'm obviously not going to get in a doctor's way. But so that kind of comes back to like being able to read the room and know what's going on. But as a birth photographer, I think you also just have to be creative with your shots. You have to be able to see something different, even if you're like just in this tiny corner. I had a mom one time who she's just She in normal life is just a very, very modest person. But in labor, she took all of her clothes off. And I knew that photos are very important to her. And so I had to get really creative. And I was like using other things to like block, body parts. And I think that's just part of our job. And if you're going to be a birth photographer, you kind of have to know that going into it. I have been allowed into the OR one time. That's kind of a whole nother thing, but I think that's also a conversation that you have to have. If you are planning to have a C-section, I think that it is possible, and what we need to do as moms and as photographers is just have the communication with the care provider. So bring it up early, bring it up often. Ask them, like, how can we make this happen? Because hopefully you have a team and a care provider that wants to, give you the birth you want. And if photos are important to you, but you need a C-section, I feel like there's a way to work it out, and we need to keep moving forward. It's 2019, like, let's just keep pushing for these things. And birth is changing, and I think that birth photography can be part of that. So.
For sure. What would be some other things that you would say if a mom is looking for birth photography and maybe she's still a little bit unsure about it, but what would be, like, I know you said it's really important to ask questions. What kind of questions should a mom be asking in order to figure out if that's if birth photography maybe in general is a good fit for her, but also just like what questions would be what you would suggest asking from your perspective that would help a mom know, okay, this is going to be the right photographer for me. Because there's, like with any kind of photography, there's different styles, there's different personalities. And especially with birth photography, you want to connect like personality wise with who's going to be in that room with you. So what would be some questions or some tips that you could share if a mom is considering it and maybe wants to reach out and ask some different questions? What do you think makes a great birth photography, and like what questions could kind of pull that out?
Yeah, I definitely think meeting in person, if you can, is really important. So even if you're not sure, your photographer that you're talking to should be happy to meet with you in person. Ask them just about their experience. How many births have they shot? I mean, of course, we all start somewhere. But I think it's just good to know where they're at. Ask them what types of birth they shoot often. So if they've only ever shot hospital births and you're having a home birth, it's very different, and it's just a conversation that you want to have. So just make sure you're asking just a lot about their experience. Obviously, you want to see their work, make sure that your styles are the same, and just have a cup of coffee with them. Just get to know them and see, because if they're, someone who's very, loud and you're a little bit more quiet and reserved, like that may not be a good fit. And vice versa. So I think really just meeting in person is key, and just asking them about their experience. And maybe just talking through your birth plan a little bit too. I think sometimes when you start to talk about your birth plan, you can kind of get a feel for, I hate to say like judgment, but you don't want someone coming into your space that's not fully 100% supportive of whatever you're choosing. So if you've chosen a home birth and this birth photographer is not comfortable with that, and you kind of get that sense, then that's not someone that you want in your space, and you should probably keep looking. So I just think meeting in person is so, so key.
That's such great advice. What would you say are some of the things, I guess, like if a mom is considering birth photography and just sort of can't wrap her mind around like how to prepare for that and how to like get the most out of that experience. Can you share maybe just some of the things that you walk your expecting moms through as far as like, this is how we're going to kind of build that relationship before that experience that like could maybe just kind of like help an expecting mom kind of like wrap her mind around like, okay, well, like I could do that. Like, what are some of the things that you do personally, like as somebody who's like so gifted in this area? Like, what do you like, what's your process like? Maybe just like some pieces that you have found that like has really made a difference in your ability to capture those kind of emotions because of the relationship or the experience that you've kind of walked them through kind of leading up to that, so that you're not the stranger in the room. Like you're somebody they already know. What are some things that you do with your moms?
Yeah, so I always have an initial meeting, whether it's before they book or after they book. Sometimes even more than one. If they're booking like first trimester, we might get together again second or third trimester. I also give them my cell phone number right out the gate. So I'm always happy to get updates. Nothing is TMI. I always tell my clients that. So if you have a question or you want to give me an update, or you just need like some prayer, or you need a little bit of extra support, like please, like I'm here for you. Reach out to me. I actually am hoping to get my doula training in the next year or so.
Yeah.
So I think that kind of, it's kind of like my doula heart, where I'm like, reach out to me. Like I want to support you. And I think that my clients have reacted really well to that, because then we've been chatting over the few weeks leading up to their labor, not just like, I haven't heard from you in months and I'm in labor. So we've been talking. I know what she's anxious about. I know the types of things she's worried about. I know what her partner's worried about. And so we go into it knowing, I know her history. I know all the things that are important to her. I also send a questionnaire, which is just, it's a little thing, but I feel like it goes a long way, just to know what is important to her as far as photos go. If she's had a baby before, what her labor looked like, what her hopes are for her birth. So I asked for 3 words to describe her ideal birth experience. So if she's looking for, like, I've had some people that are like, I want laughter and music and I want to be happy. And so then I know I can come in and we can chat a little bit, and, but if someone says calm and serene, then I know that I need to be sort of the more fly on the wall person. So just having, again, it just comes back to communication and having those conversations beforehand. And I think opening up myself to like, text me whenever you want, call me whenever you want, has gone a long way. So
that's amazing. What would you, I think one of the top, like, I would say like I don't want to say practical question, but kind of a practical question, that I feel like somebody would ask as an expecting mom that might be wondering, who's like not in the photography space, is that they're thinking, okay, well, I don't know when exactly I'm going to give birth. Like I have a due date and I hope to give birth on that due date or maybe sooner. So how does that work as far as just out of curiosity for somebody who's maybe new to the whole idea of birth photography? How does that work when somebody has a due date, but it's not ever a guarantee? Even, we were talking before this episode that like you're on call for a birth right now. So how does that, just if somebody's like wondering like how that even works about not knowing exactly, do you have like a system for that to like make sure that like you don't overbook yourself or you don't book more than one birth like close together? Like how does that work?
Yeah. So I actually have my little birth calendar right here next to me. Has my whole year displayed so that I make sure I'm not booking too much. Personally, I take on 2 per calendar month, and that works for me, and everyone does it a little bit differently, but I go on call for you at 38 weeks until baby is born. I always tell my clients, if you go into labor before that, I'm not going to just ignore you, but I just can't guarantee that I can, secure childcare and all of those other things. So I go on call at 38 weeks. Generally, my clients are texting me, when they're starting to feel contractions or they think something might be happening. So I have a lot of heads up. And then I try and go once active labor has started, an active labor pattern that is not likely to stop. So yeah, I mean, I feel like it's mostly in my hands. I do, I'm figuring all the scheduling out and all of that. All you need to do is keep me updated. So hopefully I'm making it easy on their end.
That's awesome. I feel like that's always one of the things that people wonder and ask. It's a question that I get about newborn photos. So I can't even imagine it would be like even more so a question about, the actual like birth, like not really knowing when that is. I would love for you to share any standout like encouraging birth stories. Like obviously you've attended quite a few. So was there any that kind of stood out to you as like one that you'd love to share that would, just be, whether it was like just like unique or just like really special, like what would be some of like your top, like a favorite birth story or something that stands out to you in your experience?
So it's really hard to pick just one. So I was maybe going to talk about a few of them.
You can definitely talk about a few of them. I just didn't want to put you on the spot and be like, please share 10 birth
I love
stories.
them all for different reasons, but a few sort of recent ones that have stuck out to me. I had one in February, and I actually just posted her birth story on my blog. So if you'd like to read the full story, you can. But she was so she had a nursing background, and she had actually worked at this birth center where she was giving birth. So she knew a lot about birth, and she just went into her birth so positive and so excited to just experience it, no matter what it was going to be like. And it was just like awe-inspiring. The way she was just in between every contraction, she was like, this is amazing. And she's like, this is so crazy. Like she just had this, just such excitement for every bit of it. I have a photo of her literally at 9 centimeters, just like joking with her husband. I mean, it's crazy. And I just think the power of your mental state and your perspective on birth makes all the difference. And so I will just always remember her birth just because she was just so wonderful and positive and smiling, and it was just so sweet. There was another one that I loved in particular because her midwife, her team was so amazing. They were almost completely hands off. I think they checked her when she first came into the birth center just to make sure that she, was actually dilating and could stay. And then from there on out, they let her just do her thing, and she moved around. She listened to her body. At the end, she looked at her midwife and she said, is it okay for me to push? And her midwife said, well, if you feel baby coming down and you feel like pushing, then push. And I was like, that's amazing, because lots of care providers are going to be like, oh, well, let me check, check for dilation, see if you're complete, which is fine. And that's, very typical in a lot of situations. But I just loved how this midwife was just like, well, if you think it's time and you're feeling that baby coming, then yeah, it's time to push. And she did. And her baby was here in like 3 minutes.
Wow. That's so cool.
It was amazing. And then the last one that I love is, I had a photo go viral this past, I guess, like in May. I shot a birth. They thought they were having their third daughter, and she had the baby very quickly. She got up she had a water birth. She got up out of the tub, got on the bed, went to cut the cord, and she said, what is that? And it was a boy. It was their first boy. Her husband fell onto the floor. It was just the most amazing thing. I say this all the time, but I'm so happy that I just kept shooting, because my jaw was on the floor along with everybody else's. But even that, it was so amazing. But the whole story of that birth was just incredible. The fact that, her husband had 2 strains of the flu, and if she had been planning a hospital birth, he would not have been able to be there, period. He wouldn't have been allowed in the hospital. So the fact that they happened to choose a birth center for the third baby was just such a God thing. And he had, orchestrated the whole thing, and it was amazing. So, I'll never forget that moment.
I love that. She's actually, that mom is joining me on the Confident Momcast this month. So she's going to share her whole story, which I was like really excited because I knew that you had photographed her birth. So it was like really, like, I was so glad that I was like going to get to talk to you and then like hear her perspective. And I know she's going to talk about how happy she was that she worked with you, and like what, now that to like think about her experience where like you think that you're having a girl and you find out in that moment that you actually had your third baby is a boy when you thought it was going to be your third girl, like what that would have been like had there not been a photographer there. Like that photograph would not have existed had she not, and so I just was like, man, that's like something that like they wouldn't have. So,
and I was only there for like 10 minutes before he was born. So like I barely made it. It was wild. It was so wild.
That's so crazy.
Yeah.
I would just love for you to share just overall. I know we've touched on probably a lot of the pieces just in answering other questions, but when somebody is asking you like why you're a birth photographer, like why is that valuable to you, and why do you feel like that's like so valuable to the moms that you work with? Like what I know we titled this the value of birth photography, and I feel like we really have answered that in a lot of different ways, but as a whole, like why birth photography? Like why this job that like you're on call from 38 weeks to, till they have the baby, like that kind of, the intense schedule. It could be at any time of night. It could be, I feel like, I mean, at least in my experience, births aren't usually at a convenient,
Right.
bright, sunny time of day, where,
Right.
you just like have like a babysitter easy come over. Like,
Right.
It's often in the middle of the night. You probably are, every photographer I'm sure is different in how they have their like different like photography packages and the way that it works. But you're probably like, I'm assuming you could be there from anywhere between like, like you were saying with this other mom, like you got there 10 minutes before and the baby was born, or you might be there like hours before. So like, the kind of schedule for that is not ideal. It's personally why I wasn't able to do birth photography more fully for my business, just because that type of schedule was just not something that worked for me. Mm-hmm. So what is it about birth photography that you found to be it's worth it? I don't know what day. Can't control that part of my schedule. I live on call a lot of my weeks, but it's still, that's what I love to do. So like, what is it about birth photography that you believe in so much that you would rearrange your life literally to accommodate being able to do it?
Yeah. That's a big question.
That's a big question.
I think it clicked for me when I had my first and I had a birth photographer there. And once I saw those photos, I mean, I was excited to have her there. I was a photographer at the time, so it was important to me. But then when I got the photos back, I mean, it was just like, I treasure those photos almost more than any photos in my life, and so just having had that experience personally, I knew that was something I wanted to give to other families. And I also, like I said, I'm in the process of becoming a doula as well. So I think I just have this heart for supporting families and guiding them through their options, making sure that they know their options. So it's sort of like this bigger piece of the puzzle where I want people to understand that they have options. I mean, even like tiny things, like I was talking to a client recently about how when you're at the hospital, if you have a nurse that you just don't get along with, or she's not supporting your wishes, you can ask for another nurse. And I think so many moms go into birth thinking like, I just have to do what they tell me to do. And something as simple as asking for another nurse doesn't even seem like it's on the table. And so being a small part of changing birth in our society is so rewarding to me, and being able to just support these families. And I'm starting to photograph repeat clients. The woman I'm on call for right now is a repeat client. And so that's been even more special to be able to see their family continue to grow and be there for these just life-changing moments. I just can't think of anything more rewarding. And yes, being on call is super hard. And yes, I have days where I'm like, why am I doing this to myself? But once I get there and I'm in the room and I get to experience that and I get to give them the gift of these photos, it's like all of it is 1,000 times worth it. So.
And you can see that. Like I love your work. I mean, I know we said like there's different styles, and
right.
I've never really been personally drawn to the super graphic birth photography that does exist out there, but it was seeing photos like yours that changed my mind about like, oh, okay. So like, cause I'm a very modest, I'm a very private person. So I think the idea of having another person in the room wasn't ever something that I was like, oh, I will not like that. But then I've seen your work and I was just like, I can't imagine not having like, I don't know. And just like, everything you were saying about like the emotion of it and how that allows like us to be present while,
Mm-hmm.
like you're getting those images and being able to have the story afterwards and process it. And I think that you just do like an amazing job.
Thank you so much.
One last question before we wrap up, which it's
Yeah.
kind of not birth photography specific, but I would just love to know what you feel like. Can you think of some top things that obviously you have kids of your own, but what has birth photography taught you about birth itself? Like, do you feel like, I mean, being a birth photographer, you've gotten to attend so many different kinds of births, whether it's, different, birth centers, hospitals, home, different people, different personalities, different birth plans, different visions for how they want their birth to go. Has there been something that you can think of that stands out to you that was like, I didn't know this about birth, or I didn't appreciate this about birth, even with my own, in the same way that I've learned having been able to attend so many? Does anything like stick out to you as far as that goes?
Yeah, a couple things stick out to me. So I think the biggest thing for me when I was first starting out, I definitely had this idea of like the way you should birth, which I'm even embarrassed to say now. But I had planned this out of hospital, unmedicated birth. And even with my own birth, it actually didn't go as I planned. But I still had this idea of like, okay, well, next time I'm going to do it this way because it's the way that, it's the right way to do it. It's the way God made us, like blah, blah, blah. And throughout the years, I've seen all different kinds of birth. I've seen C-sections. I've seen unplanned C-sections, planned C-sections, epidural births, unmedicated births in all different locations, all types of things. And it's really just opened my eyes to every woman is different, every baby's different, every pregnancy is different. And I am not there to try and push my beliefs on you as far as birth goes. I am there to support you in your decisions. And I think that applies to your friends. I think it applies to your family. Whatever the mom who is having the baby has decided, I think that more of us women need to support that. And it's amazing to me how often I see moms really shaming other moms, whether it's on purpose or not, about their decisions or about the way things went. It breaks my heart because we are all in this together and we're just doing the best we can with the knowledge that we have. So I think over the years, I've really learned that firsthand. The other thing that I was going to say was just personally what I've learned with my second son. I had a home birth, and I was able to really take all of the knowledge from having seen all of these births and apply it to myself in those moments. So I had a moment where I actually turned to my husband and I said, I am walking to the hospital if I am not at least, 6 centimeters or whatever. And right after I said it, I had a thought in my mind and I was like, oh, that means that I'm probably getting really close because I'm probably in transition. And so just having that knowledge has been so valuable to me personally. And I think that if more women had access to birth, whether you can be in a room or not, but just watching birth videos, hearing people's birth stories, just talking about it more and normalizing it more, I think we would all just be so much better off. We would all understand that it is normal and we do have options. And even though it's this big kind of scary thing that you've never done before, it's still a normal, natural thing. And we don't need to be afraid of it. We don't need to hide it and not talk about it and think it's this taboo thing. So I think those are the biggest things that pop out to me that I've learned.
I love that perspective. I think, oh gosh, everything you just shared is so good. I really like, especially to like just bringing up that whole idea that knowledge is power. And yeah. I think I've talked to a lot of moms that I feel like, looking back over their birth experience, it was almost like they felt like they just didn't want to know because it was so big, it was so scary, it was so overwhelming that they really just we're like, well, I have a great care provider. I've chosen somebody that's great. And I trust them completely. And I'm just going to do what they say and I'll just get through it. And, and everyone's different, but I've just seen firsthand. And I guess that was just such a mission of why I even wanted to have these conversations with different moms and different birth and baby experts, because I just wanted a safe place that moms could just pop in their earbuds when they're, doing other things and just feel like they can hear birth stories that aren't like, the most terrible thing that happened to me. And I want to, you know what I mean? Like that. I feel like, negativity always has a bigger, tends to have a bigger voice, but, the more the less you have to be afraid of, because you can, you have like the information that you need to make those decisions in that moment. And I think a lot of, what I'm hearing over and over again from different new moms is just the fact of like, it was the not knowing, it was that unknown that made it scary. And as soon as you decide to be, I'm going to know instead of unknow, you know what I mean? Like it actually like takes that fear away and just, all the science behind, which is like a whole other topic about how science, how the fear plays into the tension and the tension plays into the pain. And it just makes it a worse experience. So I'm really glad that you brought that up, because it's not a common conversation that people have about birth, except, and I would go, to these newborn sessions at home and, baby's only 1-2 weeks old. So the whole birth experience is brand new. And I'm talking to these new moms and they have such amazing stories. And so I just think it's like such a topic that I just feel I wish more women knew more about, because just like you were saying, you do have options and you can, make it the experience that you want. You don't have to be, just kind of on the conveyor belt, so to speak, of just going through, like, I just do what they tell me to do. And that's easier than learning it for myself. So, oh my gosh, you shared so many awesome things. I really hope that somebody who is listening that had misconceptions about what birth photography was and was totally freaked out by even just like, maybe they like clicked on this thinking that like, oh my gosh, I don't even know what these, because birth in general, which is another big mission in starting this, the topic of birth tends to be very weird. So like, I really just wanted it to not be weird, because it's not, and just like make it, aware that this exists, that this, birth photography exists and that it's valuable, and that, for the, moms don't regret having it. It's just, that kind of, deciding that that's important to you and finding someone that fits your personality and understands what you want. And whether that's somebody that, like you said, can laugh and have a joyful conversation and joke with you throughout, or if it's somebody that you did not even see in the room because they were so unobtrusive, that you can have that experience either way. And you're going to get photos that, that you treasure like so much. So thank you so much for joining me. If you are watching the video right now, you can click the link below to check out Lauren's website and connect with her more. I highly recommend following her on Instagram and all the places. Her birth photography is so beautiful. And if you're listening to this on the podcast, I'll put those links right in the show notes so you can connect with her there as well. Thank you so much for joining me, Lauren. I loved learning from you, and I can't wait to see pictures of this next birth that you're on call for.
I know, I'm excited. Thank you so much.
Have a good night.